Well, the F12 is pretty much all stripped down. We still have a few more parts to take off of it, but we are starting on the process of removing all the studs and tabs and all that stuff that we don't need. Tim got most of them chopped off yesterday and he's gonna sand them down now. So we've got all of these that were there cut off. So those need to just get nice and flushed out before we can do any painting in the engine compartment. We also need to take the subframe out and cut these things off because like we talked about last time, they're just there. I left them long just in case I wanted to do anything with a brace or bracket, but it just doesn't need to be there. It's just kind of in the way of everything. Not needed on this car. So we'll chop those off, pull the subframe out, and sand them down, make some caps, weld them up. Yesterday I was also working on designing some block-off plates because we have to seal everything in the front of the car from the inside of the car where we have these holes. So we've got this hole here where a tube used to go through, or actually this one was the door electronics. And then over here we had a tube going through there and some more wiring coming out of there. So I made a plate, or designed a plate that's gonna cap this off. But I didn't finish that one yet because I'm probably gonna wait on that one until we get all of the wiring harness stuff, because we're gonna have these electrical bulkhead connectors. So if I can draw them up in the CAD program and have the plasma cut them out, it's gonna be a lot quicker. So no reason to spend any time like making that plate and then come back with a hole saw, mark it, drill it out, drill the little holes for the bolts and all that. So we'll wait on those, but we can prep everything else. You can see we also pulled out everything out of the interior except for the shifter and the e-brake, which we will pull out. And this, you know what? I'm not sure yet, actually. We might pull them out, we might not. We have a couple holes here we have to fill. And I made some plates for those also that we'll just seam seal in. But then we have to paint it again. So we'll probably just pull those things out just so we don't get any overspray on it. They come out super easy. Like the e-brake is literally 2 bolts. The shifter is 4 Allen bolts from the bottom. So both the things come out in about 2 minutes. Probably spend more time trying to mask it off. And then in the rear, well, we'll probably pull all the rear stuff out as well. We've got the suspension back here still in place, but it's just kind of, you know, loosely bolted in. Nothing is torqued down. We have some other stuff we have to cut off back here as well, like the original brake line brackets and ABS sensors, wiring, stuff for wheel liners, which we're not gonna run. So since we have to do all that work, we'll just drop the rear subframe. That way we can paint all of that stuff in the wheel wells also, and just leave the outside of the car and the door jambs and all that red. But everything else, we'll paint it with that same like gray paint that we have in the interior. And then in the rear, the radiator is gonna come out again, and I have to weld up the whole fuel cell cage. So it's only tacked in place right now. Not focused, there we go. So it's only tacked in place. So I've got to weld all of that up, and then we can paint all that stuff. And then once all that's done, we can start on final assembly. Put all the proper hardware in, put nylocks. Right now we're just running regular nuts because it comes in and out easily. So you can spin them on by hand, makes it just quicker to assemble. But for final assembly, we're gonna put nylocks on everything, or Loctite if it's a bolt that needs Loctite. Well, keep on cranking. We're gonna get this thing done real soon. Got it? Good, because I don't got it. I got the bracket bolted on the car and just use these bolts and nuts to basically get our 30mm gap going here, which is how much we want to lower it. So we made this first plate, and this is actually going to stay in the car. So this is part of the new mount. That'll get welded there, and I'm working on the template for the front panel here. So that's going to be cut out of aluminum also, and that'll get welded up. And then once I get this done, I'll make some gussets on the backside to help support it all. There's going to be a lot of load on the steering rack, racing or drifting. There's going to be a lot of full lock to full lock. So we want to make sure that those mounts are really solid. You don't want any flex in there. It's going to give you a really weird steering feel. Also, toe changing throughout the corner is never good. So we'll make sure we make these nice and thick and weld it all up and get them, well, basically just super stiff and strong, so we don't have any issues. It's coming together now. So we've got the top plate, the side plate, this back gusset. That's an extremely dirty weld, is actually what Tim is working on the other side. There's still some paint and stuff on the chassis in that area, so it's just kind of smoking and burning up. So he's gonna go through there right now and wire brush it, torch it, clean it all off. And while he's torching it, that will actually help us because we're going to preheat that thick aluminum and the chassis up, which will make the welds penetrate better. Also just have the weld puddle flow a lot better, since this is obviously the whole chassis is aluminum, so it's kind of acting like just a giant heat soak. Any heat it absorbs, it wants to dissipate it quickly and spread it out. So he's working on this. He's going to torch all these spots, scrape them, wire brush them, and get them all ready. And then I'll come back through and weld it all up. And it is done. So we've got the new steering rack mounts where we want them. They're all welded up. It was kind of a pain because the chassis obviously is dirty. All, you know, aluminum. There's still some paint. We try to sand it down as much as possible, scrub everything out, but there's still the dirt that comes out of aluminum, cast aluminum, and that's just part of it. But we got them welded up. Looks good. It looks really strong. I don't think we're gonna have any issues with that. Also got the fuel cell cage all welded up here. Got those little tabs on the back welded in place. And I think that means we're done with the chassis fab. I got to go through my list again, just double check everything to make sure that we can just start prepping it for paint now. Yeah, I think that is it. I hope. The good thing is that we're using a paint that we can just easily sand down and weld and then put new paint on it. So if we do forget something, it's not the end of the world. It's not like we're going to send the car out for powder coat, which looks awesome, but makes it absolutely impossible to work on the car after. So I've seen other guys that do powder coated chassis. I'd say if you started doing like a production line and you know exactly what the cars are and you're kind of replicating them, powder coat might be the way to go. Has a really strong finish. Like if you powder coat the car, interior, roll cage, everything stays really nice. But this is not that car. This is a custom one-off build, obviously. And eventually, sometime in the future, we might even change the interior color, change the engine bay color. But for now, we're just gonna paint it that silverish gray color. I think it looks good. And like I said, it's easy to touch up. So this is version 1 of this car. There may be some small iterations in the future. We might add things here and there. Nothing big, obviously. We've got all that big stuff done. But in the future, if we wanted to add air jacks or something like that, which would just make changing the tires just a little bit faster, but also that would require to have a nitrogen bottle and a hose and a regulator and the wand and all that stuff that has to go with the car. It complicates things a bit rather than a good old 5-lug and a jack and an impact gun. So that's how we're gonna run it for now. Obviously those wheels also are off the shelf. If we started doing air jacks and we wanted a single mono lug in the center, more complications, more time and more money, but we're nearing completion now of version 1 of this car. And first step is to get this thing running, get it driving, test it, and then see if there's anything that we want to improve on or change in the future. All right, Tim got this thing all ready to go, ready to paint at least. All the chassis fab is done. You got everything cleaned up. wiped off with acetone and obviously masked off all of the body so we don't get any overspray on that. So I'm gonna let Tim get to partying with those rattle cans, get this thing coated, make it look good, and I am going to head over to the powder coaters because I got to drop off the subframes, front and rear subframe. We've got the radiator bracket there, and also the front intercooler mount. And yeah, Tim will be here spraying away.
Yeah, I try to get some ventilation. I don't know if I should close one door or not.
I think maybe leave it open, but probably close that door just to make sure like nothing goes into the other rooms.
Oh, right.
And then it can just be contained in this area. And
Yeah.
since there's no other cars in here,
Yeah,
it should be good.
It's just parts, some old parts.
Yeah, but I think it's all right. I think I don't think it's gonna get much like overspray.
Yeah. It'll just float around here and then go out.
Yeah, maybe even like if you put a fan in that back corner kind of blowing that way, yeah, then we can make sure those things stay clean. But I am not going to stay here and huff the paint with you, Tim. I'm going to go drop these parts off to get powder coated before they close so we can get them back as soon as possible. Tim ran out of paint yesterday. We went and grabbed some more right now. This thing is looking pretty good. The front end is almost completely painted. Some little spots that he's getting right now where you still see a little bit of red. Got like little spots here and there, but overall it looks really good, especially considering that this is just out of a rattle can. It's yeah, this stuff just sprays really smooth and even. Once all the front end stuff is done, then we'll mask off the rear and get all that stuff painted. Put the car up in the air, paint the floor basically. There's a couple spots we need to put a little bit of seam sealer on, so we'll do that and then spray it. And this thing will be ready for reassembly, so we can get all the parts actually bolted onto the chassis, finalized, like actually bolted on. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And right now, while Tim is painting that, I'm working on the rear brake caliper mounts. So if you guys remember, we cut the stock, like the factory brake mounting ears off of the factory F12 uprights. So these are chopped off here and smoothed out. We got these pieces here cut. I didn't cut them on the plasma because these are actually laser cut, so they're very square. But the plasma, you always get a little bit of taper, and I wanted those to be extremely square. So we got those cut out at a place where you just, send off your design. They cut them out for you. Got those back, so I'm gonna weld all these up. And to make this all work, instead of the bracket being threaded, I'm gonna have to thread the calipers. So these are gonna get threaded, and to make that work, obviously these calipers are aluminum, so I'm gonna have to put some helicoils in there. So I'll drill these out, tap them, install the helicoils, and then they will have a nice solid thread, and we can put a bolt through the bracket and into the brake caliper. And that's just kind of how it works on this car, with where the mount sits and where the caliper sits is actually on the other side rather than being stacked the other way, which it's hard to explain right now, but when you see it, when I get them tacked up, I'll show you guys and you'll understand it a little better. So I got those threaded. Steel nutserts are in there now with some red Loctite, so they will stay in place. These are all cleaned up. And I have one that's already set up. I shimmed it with some cardboard and some tape because the aluminum that I had was just too thick, so I couldn't get 2 pieces of aluminum in there, in between the brake pads and the rotor to basically keep the caliper dead centered. So we've got it set up here, and you can barely see a little bit of cardboard and tape sticking out of there, but there's shims on both sides, so this is centered up and that is tacked now. So you can see how we had to go with the bolts through the bracket into the caliper. That's for a few reasons. One is because we have this big hole here, which is from the factory. The studs were coming out here before, or the posts where the caliper went. So we just cut those off, but there is this hole here. So if we used a caliper, or a rotor, sorry, with a hat that was much deeper and pushed this up, then this would have been sitting in the middle. Also, it could interfere with the rest of the stuff, right? There's the old part of the calipers, the rotors, the hats, everything needs to be the right depth to not hit any of the suspension control arms and all that. So we went with this like actually a negative offset, so the rotor is actually a little bit further out of the wheel rather than being pushed in quite a bit. And that's just something that's going to work in this application. So luckily Wilwood has a ton of different hats with different offsets and different bolt patterns for different cars. So we were able to find one that will work for this application. But yeah, now that we have it tacked up, I'm going to continue welding it. I'm not worried about putting too much heat into the caliper because obviously brakes get super, super hot. I am gonna watch it and make sure I don't get this thing like frying hot. But if you guys watch race cars, you can see the brake rotors actually glowing red. That's how hot they get. So the calipers are absorbing a ton of that heat and dissipating it. But that's why you see race teams always changing the brake fluid, because the brake fluid gets really hot and then it just doesn't work as well. You get a spongy pedal, basically builds up air in the system. So they'll flush out the brake fluid and get that driver a proper brake pedal feel, which is very, very, very important for a race car. Because you're driving the car to the absolute limit. You're pushing as hard as you can going into the corner and finding your braking point. And if that moves back by 2 feet because your pedal's a little soft, that means you missed the apex by 2 feet, which means you're probably going to be on the marbles and you're probably going to track out a bit wide, which means you're probably going to run off the track at the exit. So not a good thing. Consistent brakes are very, very important. So yeah, strong calipers, strong bracketry, making sure nothing flexes. Wheel bearing flex also has pad knockback, but brakes are important. So remember that. Race car brakes, very important. All right, we got these parts back from the powder coater. We can get some more pieces on the F12. We got the front and rear subframe here. We got the intercooler mount, and then still in the back of my truck over there, we got the radiator bracket at the top of the radiator. Let's start putting this thing together. I also got some parts from the Ferrari dealership and brought them over to D-Sport, so that's actually moving along really well. Hopefully in the next 4 or 5 days, the engine will be done. We can go pick that thing up and get it in the car as well. So trying to line everything up right now. We got all these parts. Obviously we can start bolting everything together in the back. When we get the engine, we can get that in the car. We can schedule the guy who's doing the wiring harness for us to come down. He's got that about 80 or so % done. He'll bring it over, drop it in the car, and then he can finish all of the other connections. So all the wires will be run. He just needs to trim the ends, label them, put connectors on them and all that, and get them dialed in perfectly. So we're gonna get this thing ready to put in the car, get the rear subframe in there, put the rear suspension back in, and get the brakes on there finally. I got the uprights done, we got some wheel studs, we got all kinds of stuff. So let's get going on this thing. Working on the fuel cell right now, trying to put the bolts in, and there's just a little bit of paint that got in the threaded holes in there. So I'm just taking the tap and tap attachment here. So putting them in, starting them by hand, getting it threaded, grabbing this guy, running it down, cleaning the holes out, one at a time. So that way there's no paint in the threads that's gonna hang up on the bolts. So I don't want this to cross thread the aluminum. So instead of just putting these bolts in there, cranking them down by hand, we could gall the aluminum, we could gall the stainless, and when we go to take it out, it will just be a stripped out hole. So instead of trying to do it the fast way, we're doing it the right way. Getting all of these put in one at a time, going through them takes a little longer, but it's getting done the right way. So on the front end, we've got most of the suspension components installed. We've got the steering rack in there now in its new location. That looks really good. We're just waiting on an order for some washers so we can put these all in with washers and also get the right length bolts. So this bolt here is a bit short and it needs a washer. This one's good, but it needs a washer. So I just made a big list and put an order in for washers, hardware, different length bolts, and all that kind of stuff. And I know I see the comments, and you guys are always saying that we should get one of those massive bins of like all that hardware. The real issue is that when you're building a car as custom as this, there's so many different types of hardware that you can use in different locations, like Allen head bolts, button head Allens, Torx, different screws, different lengths, there's just so many things that I like to do it where we put the car together, we have some random hardware we can use to mock up, or we can order some stuff. But when we go to the final assembly, I really like to have the exact right length bolt. And that means like within a couple millimeters of being correct. So slightly long, so it's capturing that nylock and it's not sticking out a bunch. Really, that's a couple things, right? You have these longer bolts, they hold dirt on them. So when you go to take it out, now the bolts might be dirty, it takes more time to clean them off before you can unscrew them. And the longer bolts, well, they also weigh a little bit more. Obviously on a car like this, if the car weighs 5 or 10 pounds more, it's not really gonna make a difference. But if you're building a road race car, like a Formula car or something like that, 5 or 10 pounds is actually a big difference. And if you can get every single one of those fasteners to be the exact right length, and as short as possible, just what they need to be, then, well, it's easier to disassemble, reassemble. It's all quicker like that, and you're quicker on the track. Rear subframe is also almost all the way together. We have the upper brace that we're gonna put on right now. So it's upside down so we can get to the bolts easily. We're gonna put that on the hydraulic table and flip it over on the hydraulic table and then add that other brace. And then we can bolt that into the chassis, get the rear suspension going. So yeah, Tim and I are gonna put the camera down for a minute and flip this thing over because it's pretty heavy. Subframe's light, but the diff is pretty stout. So that thing is, what do you think, 200 pounds, Tim?
Yeah, probably.
Probably somewhere around there, yeah, 150-ish dead weight. So we'll flip it over and then show you guys the next step. So I got the powder coat removed from these holes because we've got these massive bolts that we have modified. This used to hold the factory transmission in place, and now it's gonna hold the brace that goes over the top of the diff. So it's just a really good solid mounting point that we could use, that we didn't have to modify the subframe at all in that spot. So it worked out well. But when it got powder coated, they plugged the thread side, but not all the way through, which was my fault for not telling them, but easy enough fix. I got the torch, heated up the inside of the hole, and then used a little, like a 3/4 inch wire wheel on the Dremel, and just kind of went through there and knocked all the powder coating off of there. So now these bolts fit nice and smooth in there. And Tim is unwrapping the cross brace that also came back from the powder coater. There we go. Yeah, so this basically just ties everything in. Top of the diff to the subframe. The bottom of the diff is obviously on this steel box tube mount that we made that bolts onto the factory subframe. It should be nice and strong and handle all of the 1,500 horsepower of clutch kicking, tire smoking abuse that this thing is going to get. What do you think, Tim?
I think it would be strong.
I think so.
This
It looks pretty
strong
buff.
structure.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen worse. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some that in some pro drift cars that are kind of questionable, and unfortunately, in FD, you can't make your own subframe. You have to run the factory subframe and modify it to fit the diff, kind of like what we've done here. But they have a lot of rules in place that don't allow you to do certain things, which makes a very difficult subframe to build that's strong. The sheet metal, like on my E46 subframes are already weak from the factory, and then you take a huge section of that subframe and cut it out and then try to build some more strength back into it. It's tough. So yeah, we spent a lot of time developing a subframe structure that would be strong enough, and we did it. It lasted for many years, and it's still in the car. Still on the first subframe that went in. I think it was in 2016 when I built that car. So lots of years of abuse on that thing.
All right, get in. We gotta go.
We're going right now?
Yeah.
All right.
It's important.
All right, let's go. Well, it's not starting out good over here, guys.
Nice and blocked. Hopefully the other side is open. Otherwise,
Hopefully.
I might have to drive on the sidewalk.
I don't even know if there's room on the sidewalk. This guy's like all the way up in here.
Oh, we're good.
Oh, we can get out the front. Dude, it's crazy over here.
There's like 4 trucks long.
Lined up like all the way down the block.
I can't really see.
Wild.
I'm worried now.
Let's see. This guy's...
Oh wait, something's coming.
Yeah, so another truck's coming through. Watch out. And he's coming through hot too.
Yeah, they're not. All right, we're good.
All right, let's go. All right, guys, so we got to go and do an update. We're going to check in on one of the cars. So
2 cars. There's 2 cars there.
2 cars.
Yes.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, don't forget about the important one.
Yes. All right, so we're gonna go check on 2 cars. So we're gonna do that, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that I didn't even know about until now. And Damon and Dave obviously are just getting back from Gumball, but not here. They're back in Canada, or they will be back in Canada soon. So they asked us to make sure everything is still moving along properly. Things are progressing, and it's, you know, we have so many cars. There's a lot to deal with. All the logistics of what car is where, what's happening to the car, making sure that everybody's on top of things and getting stuff done, making sure the parts are ordered for whatever needs to get done on the cars. So yeah, a lot of moving pieces, and obviously, you know, we don't have as many cars as we did a few months ago, but we still have a lot of cars, and obviously a lot of them are kind of in progress. So let's go check these things out and see how they look. We have arrived. Inglewood Transmission and Body Shop.
Should I park in the back?
Yeah, probably. It's kind of busy over here. Actually, a lot of cars in here today.
It's super busy
It's
back
like
here too.
a lot going on.
I'll try and stay out of the way.
Tuck in here, maybe? That truck's pretty cool.
Oh, sick. It's like slam.
Yeah. Looks like it doesn't run right now, but
It doesn't
working on that. Well, that's pretty cool. And I'm actually really excited about seeing the car when it's all done, because the color that Damon picked out is a really, really cool color. I've always liked it. When he told me he was going to do it, I was pretty pumped. So it's gonna be really cool to see it when it's done. And the new spray booth and everything that Evan's got going on over here, they're doing a lot of upgrades.
Yeah, they're getting quite busy and they're expanding.
Yeah.
And I didn't know like this place was so complex. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's a maze of buildings that are somehow kind of connected to each other, and they're just like renting out these units and trying to kind of get this whole complex. But that's a whole nother, you know, issue, right? Trying to get people out of their lease, or hope when their lease is up they don't want to renew their lease so you can get more space.
Yeah,
But
because you want to have your own spot, and you know you got to be able to trust the people in their spot, especially when you're working on nice stuff like this.
yeah,
It's just better to have control, right?
definitely. Yeah, he was like, oh yeah, there's a guy here that does this, and a guy here that does this, another guy here that does this. It's like a lot of people that are all kind of in this same place using the same entrance and
You
exits.
got a situation.
I would just start going, because they're blocking this lane. We got a tow truck out front dropping another car off. Oh, you got 2 more cars after this. Oh, Tim's going for it.
All right, we're good.
All right, so next stop, we need some food. I'm hungry, Tim.
Oh yeah, we're in Long Beach.
Yeah, we should eat some here. Something different than the usual Compton.
4 spots.
Yeah. Let me pull up the map and see what we got going on over here. We are, I don't know, we're here on 4th Street and found a spot. That place over there looked pretty good.
Somewhere kind of downtown Long Beach.
Downtown-ish. Just a little bit out of downtown. It's also some Mexican place over there.
I think the lights are flashing, but
I don't know. Yeah, it's Long Beach. Just got to run over here. I'll try this place. Looks pretty good. We'll find out. It's always cool to try something new, and like we do not have a lot of options. Yeah, in Compton. Well, what do you think, Tim?
It was pretty decent.
4 out of 5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good, solid. Food was good, well seasoned.
Yep.
Good change of pace from.
Yeah, it was definitely better than the normal stuff we eat around the shop. Yeah, kind of cool vibes over here. But now,
it's nice ocean breeze.
nice. Doesn't smell like Compton, but back to the shop. Here we go. You know what's funny, Tim, is that we're getting on the 710, right?
Yeah.
And right down the street here is where the other old Hoonigan building
Oh,
was.
it's like it's being used for something now.
Yeah. That's crazy. I was on my phone and I just looked up and I saw that. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. This is the old Hoonigan spot. I remember being back there back in the day.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
That's a small lot.
It is. Very small. All right. Well, back to DDE HQ we go. Or, I mean, we attempt to go back to DDE HQ.
It's around the, typical California
Yeah,
traffic hour.
it's always trucker hour over here by the Port of Long Beach.
Sometimes it's worse than other times, though.
Yeah, it's actually moving right now, so it's not the worst it's been.
Yeah,
For sure.
I mean, it's getting close to that time, though.
It definitely
so
is.
We're trying to make it out of the congestion zone before it's too bad.
Yeah, so we can get back to the shop, work for a while, and then jump in the traffic and head home.
Yeah.
Yep. The quick change diff is bolted in place. Everything's all tightened up. So now we can put it into the chassis and start, line it up, get all those bolts in. And then we can put in all of the control arms, the shocks, the hubs. That now I have the new brake caliper ears welded onto. So we can bolt on the new calipers, the rotors. And then once that's done, I can measure for the brake lines. So we can have those custom made. And we're getting pretty close here. We've got a lot of parts that are already completed that can just get bolted on. So we're just kind of going through that process. And when the engine comes back, it's going to come together really fast. And hopefully this thing will be running in the next 2 weeks or so, maybe 3 weeks at the most. So can't wait to hear this thing fire up. Both subframes are in. Tim's tightening up the bolts on the front subframe. We did have to spend a while going through all of the hardware. There's a lot of different length bolts and a lot of different styles of bolts. So we figured out where they all went. Of course, there's no diagrams online of what any of the bolts are. So it took us a couple minutes, but we got it all sorted. And now it's completely bolted in the car. We can start with all the control arms and the uprights and the rear, since the front is basically all done. One step at a time. So I'll tell you guys a little bit of my thought process here when installing hardware. So this bolt wouldn't have fit from the top down because the chassis is in the way. So that one has to go like that, bolt from the bottom. Ideally, in some cases, you'd want the bolt from the top going down, because even if the nut came off, the bolt can't fall out, so the suspension cannot release itself from the car. But since this is a race car that we're always going to be checking, you can put some bolts in from the bottom up to make it easier to work on. So all these bolts that are coming in this way, when you pull it out, you can yank it out of the bottom. Obviously, you have all the room below where you might run into an issue trying to pull a bolt out from the top. It might be a little tight. So all those bolts are gonna go in from the bottom. And then on the top ones, we've got them dropping in from the top down. That's an easier way to get it in there, and also there is no restriction on the top when you're working on the car. So if you're inside of the wheel well, obviously the brakes and everything are in your way, you can get the bolts out from the top easier. This one is still loose because it is about a 1/4 inch too long. So I ordered another pair of bolts for these that would just, like I said, doesn't make that much of a difference, but everything on this car and the cars that I built, I want to be as correct as possible. There's always some compromises. There's always something you're going to do to make it easier to work on, or whatever it might be that someone else might not think that that's the way to do it. But everybody has a different style of doing things. I've seen a lot of other people's cars that I walk over to and I go, I don't know if that's the best way to do it. I probably wouldn't have done it like that, but they have a competitive car and it works for them. So there isn't any one way that's correct. And you can kind of see that in some racing like Formula One, where you have a rule book and all these teams have very different looking cars. They're trying to come up with the best way to make it work with the knowledge that they have. And then you kind of see them kind of all evolve mostly into one direction. They pick up little things off of other cars and say, well, that's really working well, so we should try to do that. But that's what I like about it. Everybody has a different style, a little bit of a different method of doing things, and so it keeps it interesting. So one other cool thing that I wanted to show you guys I guess a lot of people know, but a lot of people don't, is how to easily identify whether it's a standard bolt or a metric bolt. So the easiest way is by the markings on the head of the bolt. These ones here are standard bolts. So they always have these lines coming out of them. That's a standard bolt. And then we go into over here. That says 10.9 on it. That's a metric bolt. So the metric bolts don't have those little lines. And then I'll tell you the grade of the bolt. So this is a 10.9 grade. These are grade 8. So the standard bolts tend to be lower strength-wise than a metric bolt. You can get a 8.9 metric bolt, 10.9, and even a 12.9. So different grading system, I think, slightly, but also just knowing whether it's a standard or a metric bolt just by looking at the head is really easy. And then you can kind of identify the threads a lot easier once you know if it's a metric or standard. So most 10 millimeter bolts will be a 1.5 thread. Sometimes they're 1.25, which is what Ferrari's using in a lot of these places, which is kind of weird to me that they're using a fine thread going into the aluminum. So these bolts here, these are metric bolts, and they're 16 millimeter head. They're a 10 by 1.25 thread going into aluminum. Usually you would use a 10 by 1.5 or even a 1.75, which means the threads are coarser and they're further apart. So the aluminum on the chassis or whatever aluminum thing you're bolting it into has a better chance of not ripping those threads out. And we found that actually quite a few threads were damaged on this car, just a little bit of corrosion on there, and it tends to pull the threads out because they are much thinner when they're a fine thread. Now, fine thread has some advantages. I don't want to bore you guys too much with all these little details, but a fine thread is going to take a lot more turns before it falls out. So the finer the thread also, if that fastener loosens itself by a 1/16 of a turn, it's going to have almost no play. If you have a very coarse thread and it loosens a 1/16 of a turn, you might have quite a bit of slop and things are going to start moving around. So there's so many different types of hardware and situations where you can use them that you really have to kind of know quite a bit to pick the right hardware for the right spot on the car. Oh, and I almost forgot. Why are we using standard hardware on this car? It's a Ferrari, everything's metric. Well, now that it's a race car, a lot of the parts on the car are standard bearings, standard Heim joints, and that is because of the ease of getting all that stuff in the United States. It's a lot harder to find a good quality metric Heim joint than it is to find a very good quality standard Heim joint. So the kit that we bought that these knuckles came from, it had a lot of standard hardware and then some metric hardware. So it was already a bit of a mix and all the Heim joints were already standard. So it just made sense to keep it that way. And then we'll know that all those bolts are 1/2 inch, 20, all the way around. They're all 1/2 inch, 20 thread bolts. Some are different lengths and stuff like that. But then we can have an assortment of those bolts in the 3 or 4 different lengths that we're running. And we can have a spares package that's all laid out with washers, with nylocks, all ready to go. They can be in little boxes or baggies for, front suspension, Heim joints, whatever they might be, all labeled. And yeah, everything is just really easy to figure out. Once you work on a car a few times, you kind of know it. And also, if you don't, sometimes you can just take a Sharpie and write down next to it what it is or what size that fastener is. If someone else might be working on the car, if you have a race car and you have a few different guys that are crewing for you, you write down on the bottom of the car, 19 millimeter head or 3/4, which is the same thing. But that way, when they go to grab wrenches, they look at it, boom, you grab the right wrench the first time. Rear suspension is in. Knuckles are mostly on it. Tim's got a couple bolts to tighten down there. And while he's doing that, I'm gonna get the new studs installed. So the factory uses bolts, not studs. So we're gonna screw these in and then we'll have a stud sticking out. So it makes changing the wheels so much faster and easier. We didn't have to do that on the front because the Corvette knuckles, the hubs that we got, already have studs. So those are ready to go, but we'll pop these into the rear and that'll make changing tires, instead of having to pull the bolts out one at a time and then trying to line up the wheel and put a bolt in and thread it without, the wheels flopping around, it's just a pain. So studs are the way to go for a race car for sure. The rear brakes are on now, looking good. Got the studs in there, nice long studs, so they're gonna be easy to get the nuts threaded on. We put the wheels on.
Yeah, it makes it so much easier than having to, like you said, align the wheels on and all that craziness, especially in the moment.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Trying to rush and get a tire change done. And these ones have the bullet nose, so you can actually get the nut to go on there before it starts threading on. So when you're lining it up, you can grab a nut and you just throw it on so it sits there by itself. Makes it way easier to get it started instead of trying to start directly on the threads and kind of find the right angle and turn it in. So that helps quite a bit too. We also got a couple extra studs because you never know. Sometimes you're throwing wheels on, you're hitting it with the impact gun, then that didn't get started or it was galled a little bit and now you got a cross-threaded stud. So got a couple extra to make sure that we don't have to order a spare and wait for it. Also got the front tie rod connector pieces done. So those are on the car now, machined down, threaded, and it's all dialed in. Right now the car is at full lock, so a lot of angle on each side, and has quite a bit more Ackerman right now, which is basically the difference in the steering between the inside and the outside wheel. Lots of toe out, but that's because the car is at full droop, so the suspension is drooped all the way down, and basically the control arms and everything acting like it's shorter, the camber's changed, all that stuff. So hopefully when we put it up, or we put it at ride height with the wheels on it, all that will be pretty much parallel steering with a little bit of Ackerman in it, which is what it was when we tested it. I did make like some tie rod offset adapters to be able to use the steering rack, but move the tie rod where we wanted it to go. So we figured out where the steering rack needed to go, and then we were able to move the steering rack down that much. So this is the first time it's actually been all together with the steering rack in the new position. Also, ran into another issue that, well, it's not really that big of an issue, but something that we have to deal with that I haven't had to do before because I've never built an aluminum chassis car, and that is trying to make the seatbelt harnesses bolt into the chassis in a safe spot, because the aluminum is so thin on the tunnel and on the floorboard that if you get in an accident and you have one of those regular square rectangular plates bolted through to an eyelet, it will just pull through or shear right through the aluminum. So I made this plate here.
It kind of looks like the Atari symbol.
That's exactly what I was thinking. When I was putting it together, I was like, man, that looks like an Atari symbol, which I'm old. I used to have an Atari. But yeah, so I got that on there too, and actually bolts into a couple spots on the chassis. And then over here, we'll drill these holes out. I'll weld nuts on here so we can put the eyelets in from the inside. And that'll be the center attachment point for the harnesses. And I know it looks a little bit low, but it is as high as this beam here. And there's plenty of room for the drive shaft to go through, so we're not going to have any issue there. Next is trying to figure out how to do the sub harness belt, which is basically the part of the harness that goes in between your legs, the crotch belt. And so they call it a submarine harness because it basically keeps you in position from sliding forward and underneath the lap belts in an accident. So that's what that part of 5-point or a 6-point harness does. 6-point basically spreads the load out onto either one of your legs rather than straight down the middle. So always go with a 6-point harness because you know, if you do get an accident, you'll be you'll spread the load out left and right sides, and hopefully everything else in the center will be okay. So yeah, now I got to figure out how to make that work, and then also the outside harness mounting point. So the outside ones are going to be around here. So I think what I'm going to do is make a plate that kind of comes down and over and captures this right here. That'll be a nice strong point. So that can be a fairly small plate with just a couple bends in it. But the other part of the harness, the sub belt, that's over there. So trying to figure out if I'm going to do a bar across from the left to the center and the right to the center, something that's just going to go from somewhere over here and all the way across to tie into both of those. Still trying to figure out what the best way to do that is to make it as simple as possible, look as good as possible, but also functionality is very important because obviously this is safety that we're talking about here. So making sure that these harness mounting points are in the best possible location they can be in, going off of, well, Sparco has all the recommendations for how to mount the harnesses, what angles to mount the harnesses, how far away you should be, like there's a distance, because if you get too far and the seat starts to shift, then the harness doesn't really work properly. So going off of all those recommendations, hopefully we can figure something out that's fairly simple and quick, and also kind of lightweight. Like that's the only reason I added those cutouts in this one, was just to shave a bit of weight, because that's an 1/8 inch aluminum plate, sorry, an 1/8 inch steel plate there. So if those weren't cut out, it would be a few pounds, and you know, trying to keep things light where we can. All right, well, I just ordered some hardware to weld on those things and mount them up. Apparently, that's an 11 millimeter hole there in the chassis. Very oddball, and I don't know where that hardware is, so I had to order some bolts for that so we can make sure it's all lined up before we drill the holes, but not a big deal. What is a big deal is the sim is fixed, Tim.
Yes.
Finally fixed.
I tried it, and it seems like it's working like it used to now.
So basically, since we moved here,
Yeah, something
happened when we moved.
shifted in the move or something, who knows, but we were so busy that we couldn't really like keep going on it.
It was all
And
like
then once,
out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
once everything settled down, we tried to get back into it, but it wasn't like super simple. It kind of like logged us out of everything, and some things got corrupted,
Yeah,
and it was not working like at all.
but apparently it's working now, so
Yeah,
let's
give
go
it a
test this
shot,
thing out.
and it seems like it's all back together.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to go to Grid Life this weekend at Laguna, but I decided not to go because we need to spend some time working on my car, getting it ready, loading it, mounting tires and all that stuff, but we need to work on the F12. Might be kind of dark in here, huh? It's like walking around in a cave.
Yeah, we try to keep the lights off when we're not using it, so it's a little dark, but...
The darkness. But yeah, I want to go get some laps in at Laguna if this thing is working. Let's see if we can. Where are you at right now, Tim?
I'm at Grange.
You're in Grange with a. Hang on, this thing is
some kind of S chassis, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks like a S14 dash over there.
Yeah, it seems like it's working fine. It does this weird thing that sometimes when you start it up, the handbrake doesn't work. So you got to restart the PC and then go back into it.
I wonder if that's like an Assetto Corsa kind of communication glitch.
It might be, but I found the best way to solve that is just to restart it and give it a little go. And it seems like the wheel feels fine again.
So you're gonna make it? You're gonna make it?
Ah, dude! So it seems like it's fine.
Yeah. So that's definitely better than I would do. I suck at sim drifting. I just, like, without having that feel, it is just extremely difficult to me for whatever reason. I can jump in basically whatever car and slide it around, no problem. But jumping on the sim, something just doesn't connect. I don't know what it is.
There's no feel, right?
There's no feel, exactly. And I drive completely off of feel. So, road racing stuff I can do because I pick brake markers and you can feel a bit of feedback in the steering wheel, but in drifting, you don't really feel that feedback in the wheel like you would in real life. So, yeah, set me up with something good here, Tim.
All right, let me see.
Do some Laguna Seca stuff and see if I can drift something and not crash.
Well, all the cars that feel like somewhat of a normal car are really slow. So I know Laguna's a really big track.
Yeah.
And you kind of need a lot of power, but I don't know, maybe you can bump up the tire pressure or something. I don't know how well it correlates, but...
I'll give it a shot, and then if it's terrible, I'll try some road racing. Which you got me set up with...
an AMG.
Oh, the GT3.
2015, 1 year older than yours.
Yeah.
But GT3 makes less power than yours.
Yes, quite a bit less power. Well, mine is currently not making any power at the moment. It is broken.
Yeah, you guys have seen that, and we don't really know what's going on yet, but...
Yeah, so it went over to PTG, and Steve's going to check it out for me and see what happened, what broke. Kind of bummed. Just feeling pretty good. Starting to really enjoy the car. But, it happens. So it is what it is. For now, I will put a couple laps in at Laguna in a AMG GT3 and pretend like I'm at Laguna in that car because I won't be there.
All right, Mike, here we go.
All right. This feels better.
Oh, ABS and stuff is on, so you're good.
Yeah, it actually feels okay.
Whoa!
Cold tires, cold tires. Ooh, almost gonna make that corner.
Tires aren't heated up yet enough yet. Whoa!
Ooh, we got that curve on the inside there.
Don't worry, it's not a real car.
It's a wheel breaker.
All right, Mike, here you go. Ready for a hot lap?
Let's see if I can manage to not crash.
Whoa!
I feel like I'm going pretty slow. But that's the hard thing, is like getting
That feeling, right?
feeling of speed. I think I'm starting to understand.
Pick
the
up,
car.
yeah. What's your assessment of this car so far?
Pretty damn dialed, honestly.
Does it feel weighty?
I mean, it does feel a little bit heavy, but it's so hard to tell. I haven't driven anything else here, so.
Yeah.
It's trying to carry a little too much speed there.
All right.
That was a 206.
Okay, this is the real
Oh my God.
this is the real hot lap.
Oh no, it was a 133.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's not great, but still, it was like 2.
2 is a lot. Maybe they didn't count your last one because you were going off-road too much.
I don't know, now it says 133 is the last. Definitely overslowing the corners.
Yes, it seems like it has a lot of push.
Yeah. That was good.
Yeah, that was like perfect. Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Alright, yeah, I didn't crash though.
yeah, you saved it.
The whole under tray is going. All the suspension.
Don't worry, it's not a real car. It's not a real car.
Okay, that lap was slower than my first lap.
Yeah, 134, but you went off-road for a while.
Did my brakes go away? I feel like I hit this.
Yeah, it's like, it's going really far.
sitting in this corner on the track now
Yeah.
is quite a bit wider too.
Oh, they made it wider.
Yeah, so you have a lot more runoff here. Where here it's all dirt, there's actually quite a bit of good runoff.
Oh. Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Oh.
This car likes to snap.
Yeah, I was like sliding it through the corner, trying to rotate it.
Yeah.
And then it got a little carried away, and then the slicks just overheat.
Oh, yeah, they're not designed for that.
Yeah, traction control on.
Oh, so it was fighting you.
Yeah, so I was like trying to slide a little bit, and then it cut. Yeah, that's my excuse.